As the channeler, I would like to share an anecdote. I was sighing because I was tired and it was the start of a workday at my IT job. I knew I could make it through the day, and the weekend was nearby. However, I felt that I didn't have the energy to perform well at my job that day. A Pleiadian remarked, "My dear, you have the right to be tired." So in my mind, my problem was that I was tired. In her mind, my problem was that I was in resistance to being tired and in resistance to the idea that I wouldn't perform very well at my job that day. I was creating my own suffering by being in resistance to my fatigue. And she directly addressed what she saw as my issue, my resistance to my tiredness, while I hadn't even realized that layer existed. I was still on the surface level of I am tired. If I had argued that it was my fatigue that was the problem, then I am pretty sure she would have gently pointed out that I should just do my best and be at peace with the outcome, because no one can do better than their best. On to Hakann's message.
My dearest brothers and sisters. This is Hakann speaking. I greet you in peace and love. This is another installment in our Path of series. The messages whose title starts with the path of present, a spiritual or consciousness expanding practice. Different practices will work better for different people. Hence, it is up to you to decide which practice you want to engage in. Of course, you can just try a practice and see if it works for you. And going to a conventional psychologist can also be a great option. None of these messages are a substitute for visiting a doctor or a psychologist, if you have physical or mental health problems. Articles in the last few weeks have mentioned unblocking yourself. That is a good thing in general, and it can also have the side effect of helping people manifest better things in their life. So for example, if you have emotional blocks related to relationships, that might interfere with your ability to find a relationship. If you unblock that, for example with today's technique, then you might have an easier time finding a relationship, either with or without using explicit manifestation techniques. Today's practice is self-inquiry. Or more specifically, examining your assumptions and associations and personal rules. If a so-called negative or so-called ugly thought or emotion arises in you, just observe it, without judging it or suppressing it or immediately trying to change it. And if you wish, you can then ask yourself, what assumptions underlie this? What associations underlie this? What personal rules underlie this? In the anecdote from the channeler, for example, his personal rule was that unless he had a clear illness, he needed to work and he needed to do a good job. He was experiencing some psychological distress because he knew he would do suboptimal work that day, and in his mind, that wasn't acceptable. Even though there's no law of nature that says that he needed to do a good job, and realistically speaking, no one would die and he wouldn't get in trouble for performing poorly at his IT job for one day. I imagine that some people might think, Hakann, you live in paradise, you wouldn't get it. Well, my job is roughly speaking that of an earth general. If I do my job poorly, people literally die. I have had to make the decision myself. I am feeling tired. Do I hand over my command for the day to someone else and go rest, or do I simply work and try to do my best? And early on, I did choose poorly one time, and that probably did cause the death of 2 people. So yes, I understand that it does suck to be tired, and to have to choose between either saying that you can't do the job for the day, or to do the job anyway. Although, of course, the actual victims are the 2 people who died, and their families. Admittedly, I do have the luxury that I won't get into trouble if I say that I'm going to take the day off. I understand that many of you don't have that luxury, while still being in the position that doing a poor job causes clear harm to others. So, yes, it does suck when you are tired and you have a work day ahead of you. Indeed, it does. Still, ultimately, that's just the reality of physical existence. Ultimately, we all can't do more than our best, and it doesn't actually benefit us to have a rule that we must always perform well and then experience psychological distress because we're violating our own rule. Just do your best, and that's all you can do. If you are tired, that sucks, but if you then go and judge yourself that you're going to violate your personal rule that you must work and do a good job, well, then it double sucks. And there's no reason for the second suck. If I'm using Earth slang properly. Ultimately, I think people as a child were motivated, or were driven forward, by teaching them rules such as unless you have a clear illness, you must work and you must do a good job. Children were either literally told this rule, or they were taught it because at school they weren't allowed to take time off, or do a poor job, if they didn't have a clear illness. Honestly, I think it's pretty sad that Earth children are driven forward like this, and that adults didn't take the time to set up an education system where children learn because they are genuinely excited and self-motivated to learn certain things. Because if you have a healthy child, they have plenty of energy and motivation and curiosity to learn things. And I think it's pretty sad that some people have an almost slave type of relationship with themselves, where they're trying to drive themselves forward by trying to force themselves to conform to certain rules, such as needing to perform well at all times. I know people feel that only this way they can perform well, but actually, this is just what people were taught as children. It's actually more effective to just have compassion for yourself and to do your best. Sure, it's possible that your best isn't good enough, but you'll still perform at least as well if you have compassion for yourself and do your best, rather than if you are harsh with yourself. Plus, it's less stressful. Yes, sometimes if you don't perform well, then other people get hurt, or you may get fired. Sometimes the situation you are in does indeed suck. But none of that actually proves that it's beneficial to force yourself to conform to some personal rule and then stress out when you can't live up to your own personal rule. Being harsh with yourself actually isn't ever productive, it's just a pattern you were taught when you grew up. Being compassionate with yourself is actually more productive. Not to mention that you're amazing for surviving on Earth for as long as you have, and you deserve all the love and respect in the universe. I love and respect you. So, that was one example of examining your assumptions and associations and personal rules. Namely, the channeler was tired, experienced psychological distress because of it, and we discovered that he had an underlying personal rule that didn't actually make sense and was just a remnant from his childhood. Let's look at another example. Say that you notice that you emotionally dislike a person, even though the person has never harmed you or wronged you. Well, you can just observe that and then think or say out loud, what assumptions underlie this? The answer might just pop into your mind. If it doesn't, you can try to find the answer via journaling or talking to friends. For example, you might realize that you think that he is a certain type of person, because of the way he looks or speaks. However, your assumption that he is that type of person might not be accurate. Furthermore, even if he really is that type of person, you also might have unreasonable negative assumptions about that type of people. In the same way, if you find yourself emotionally disliking a person, you might observe that and ask yourself, what associations underlie this? Then you might realize, for example, that you dislike this person because he reminds you of something or someone unpleasant from your past. Or you might realize that this person represents something to you that you would like to have or be, and you might be resentful that you don't have it. So for example, Tom might see a rich person and emotionally dislike him, either because Tom just assumes that the rich person must be evil, or because Tom wants to be financially comfortable too and is resentful of this rich person who has attained wealth. Or Anne might have been hurt by men, and therefore she might dislike men, or dislike men who remind her of the man who hurt her. And while I have empathy for Anne, and while ideally people shouldn't get hurt, and while it's not fair, ultimately it's up to Anne to do her inner work and to do her healing work here. Of course, if Hank has been hurt by a woman and he now dislikes women, then ultimately it's up to Hank too to do his inner work and his healing work. Also, you might have to ask yourself multiple times what assumptions, associations or personal rules you have, in order to go beyond the surface layer. So for example, you might see a person on the street who is dressed in a very sloppy way and find yourself judging that person very harshly. You can observe that and then ask yourself, what assumptions do I have about this person? The answer might come back, because of the way he dresses, I assume that this is an irresponsible person. Okay, but that doesn't yet explain why you are emotionally annoyed at this person. So then you can ask, for example, what associations do I have with irresponsible people? And then, with this second question, you might arrive at the real answer why you are annoyed at this person. So those are examples of things you might find if you ask yourself, what assumptions underlie this or what associations underlie this? You can also observe and ask yourself a third question, namely what personal rules underlie this? Then you might find, for example, that you are triggered by this assertive person because you were taught as a child the personal rule that you must be quiet and pleasant, and that you are too much if you ask things for yourself or if you inconvenience your parents. Or perhaps you were taught the personal rule that you are only allowed to make claims and have opinions that you can rationally back up. I have been discussing the situation where you investigate your assumptions, associations, and personal rules if you emotionally dislike a person. However, you can ask yourself these questions whenever any unpleasant or so-called negative emotion or thought arises in you. It is good to not judge whatever comes up, or be harsh to it or to yourself. If you notice a so-called negative or so-called ugly emotion or thought arising in you, just observe it, without trying to judge it or suppress it or immediately try to change it. And if you wish, you can then ask yourself, what assumptions underlie this? What associations underlie this? What personal rules underlie this? If none of that helps, another question you can ask yourself is, when did I first feel or think this painful thing? Please treat yourself with kindness. You are amazing, you deserve to be treated with all the love and all the kindness in the world. And all your inner parts are welcome and worthy of love, from my perspective. I hope this was helpful. Finally, I know the situation on Earth is very tough. We're doing as much as we think is wise to do. We are very much not forgetting you, and we have a very deep love and respect for you. Earth is incredibly harsh right now, and I think many people are doing unbelievably well given how hard it is. You have all my love and respect. Your star brother, Hakann.